Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast. We are live on the postcast following the Timberwolves win over the Memphis Grizzlies on Friday night. I'm joined by Marty Gellner of Bally Sports North. We're going to break down the Timberwolves win. The Locked On Wolves postcast starts right now.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beacon. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm joined by Marty Gellner of Bally Sports North. We're breaking down the Timberwolves win over the Memphis Grizzlies. And Marty, this was a nice win for the Wolves. They led for nearly the entire game. I think Memphis led by a point at one point in the game, but this was a pretty dominant end-to-end performance from Minnesota. They got strong all-around performances from all their best players, a good bench game as well. A lot to like in this one.
Yes, agreed. And to support your statement, yes, Memphis led 7-6, and that was it. The Timberwolves were the better team all night, and Memphis kind of stayed within arm's length. They got down 12, but they cut it to 9, but it didn't really get uncomfortable. The Timberwolves, whenever they needed a big bucket, they seemed to get one, and it never was really one of those uh-oh, here we go type of moments. I mean, it was a mature Timberwolves team. It was a balanced effort, and they were in control. They held Memphis at arm's length pretty much all night long.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. I mean, that's really kind of what it felt like. It never really felt like it was hanging in the balance. Kind of the end of the third quarter, I thought actually the Wolves responded well. There was a little bit of adversity there. There was the bad offensive goaltend call, or the other way around, I guess, that called it initially on the Wolves, and then it was on Memphis after the challenge. The Wolves got the challenge right, but Memphis got physical. The inbound, offensive foul on D'Lo, and then the jump ball at center court. Like, there was just a few plays in a row where it kind of felt like, how are they going to answer? It was, not quite to the point of teetering, but then the fourth quarter started and the Wolves were calm and collected, and for the most part kept their composure. And this was, like, I would say for like 40 of the 48 minutes, this felt like the Wolves were completely in control. The game started with strong play from Kyle Anderson and D'Angelo Russell. They kind of set the tone for the Wolves early. Memphis had a clear strategy of letting their former player / teammate Kyle Anderson, leaving him wide open on the perimeter. He knocked down his first 2 threes. And then D'Angelo Russell kind of followed that up with some strong play early, both passing and shooting the ball. I thought good decision-making early for D'Lo. And that was kind of, I thought, what set the tone early when there wasn't a whole lot of defense being played either way. But I thought the Wolves' offense was really impressive in the first quarter.
Yeah, D'Angelo Russell had 8 points in the first, it seemed like 4 minutes maybe. By the first time out, he had 8 points. And as you said, Kyle had hit those 2 threes. Kyle Anderson had 11 in the first quarter. That was a season high for him. His career high for any quarter is 12. So that was a pretty significant performance from him. His 23 points for the game was a season high. And it just really was a good game, kind of a bounce back game too for Kyle, because he hadn't played really well in the previous 2 or 3. And even Chris Finch after the game kind of acknowledged it and said, like, Kyle had just basically hit a wall physically and mentally. He just kind of needed to regroup, needed to recharge, but fully acknowledging, like, yeah, he hasn't been great in the last few. And he has been so important and so steady and so reliable for Minnesota. So to have him kind of back in that groove and playing that way and dishing those dimes. I mean, he had that steal. He picked Ja Morant right at half court or top of the key and just took it down and then left it behind the head for Jaden McDaniels. I mean, that was beautiful. And that was a good Kyle Anderson game. I mean, it just was kind of all the way around, from the shot making to the assisting. Very good game for him.
Yeah, and again, we'd seen that long stretch from him where he was playing. We even had the conversation, and I think he was asked by the media, like, is this the best stretch of your career? And he was kind of like, there was one stretch in Memphis. But other than that, yes. And then he had a couple of rough ones, and then this was one of those typical kind of all-around strong performances from Kyle Anderson. We have to talk about Anthony Edwards. I mean, his biggest quarter was the third quarter. Actually, it feels like now lately he's, he had the 3 consecutive 30-plus point games, but it feels like for the most part, the last couple of weeks, it's like the middle stages of the game is kind of when Ant takes over, like second, third quarter. Early in this game, he had the monster dunk early in the first quarter, and then didn't do a whole lot for a while. Came back in second quarter, had a big third quarter, and finished the game with really solid line. 25, 7 and 7, 50% shooting from the floor, 3 of 5 outside the arc, only a couple turnovers. And I thought was pretty good defensively. Now the Wolves, of course, no Desmond Bane for Memphis. We should say that. But the Wolves, for the most part, had Jaden McDaniels guarding Ja Morant. But still, Ant had a difficult assignment in Dylan Brooks for most of the game. And I thought this was a good two-way game from Edwards. And they needed him in the third quarter. The offense was a little bit more stagnant in the middle stages of the game. But Ant was able to do enough offensively to, like we said, kind of keep Memphis at arm's length.
Yep, his third quarter was his only double-digit scoring quarter of the game. And 25 is kind of pedestrian for Edwards. That's how good he's been lately. You mentioned he had the 3 straight games of at least 30. But he talked in the locker room after the game, and I thought it was really interesting that he was so conscious of making the right play. And he used that exact phrase a few times and just said, like, that's where his head has been, and that he knows if they double up on him, he has to kick it and find the open guy, and he has to keep doing that until they don't double up on him, and then he has to go at them. And he was very aware of that being his game plan, and that he had followed that as his game plan, and that he had been doing that lately in this last stretch of games. And he said something like, yeah, I guess I just finally realized you don't have to take all the shots. And it was so Ant-like. He said it with a smile on his face and a little chuckle. And as I was watching, I was kind of like, yeah, good point. Because it kind of felt like that at the beginning of the season, that first stretch of games, because KarlAnthony Towns needed his, and Rudy Gobert needed his, and Anthony Edwards needed his. And so Ant was a little less willing to give up the basketball, because I don't think he thought it was going to come back to him. And now that he's done it a little bit and played with this group, and he has seen that it does indeed come back to him, especially when it should, and come at the right moments, he's starting to trust that a lot more and just be focused on making the right play. And I feel like this is a game when he scores 25 and only took 5 3-pointers. This was him making the right play.
Tonight's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the #1 sportsbook in America. FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets, from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. It's all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So, football fans, basketball fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I thought defensively in this one, the Timberwolves were really impressive overall, holding Memphis to 100 points, holding them to under 41% shooting from the field, and just 24% from the three-point line. And the defense on Ja was good. I mean, he ended up with a triple-double, I think his 4th of the season, but he also had 6 turnovers, and he had to work. He only got to the line 4 times, and I mean, that is, earlier this season there was a game where he had double-digit free throw attempts against the Wolves. And I thought, for the most part, McDaniels did a good job on him and expended all of his energy guarding Ja. But I also thought this was one of Rudy Gobert's better all-around defensive games as a Timberwolf, especially in the second half. I thought he did a great job kind of beating the Grizzlies' offensive players, usually Ja, sometimes Dylan Brooks, kind of beating them to the spot, walling up. I guess he did have 3 blocks, but it was really more about altering shots. And I thought Gobert did a really good job of that in this game.
Yeah, he did. And offensively, he had a couple of really nice big dunks. The one reverse dunk from Kyle Anderson. And those are the kinds of plays that they're loud. They're making my presence known types of plays. He certainly altered a lot of shots. It's just so hard because there's no statistic that really shows us how many shots he altered in a game like this immediately, or how many shots the Grizzlies did not even take in the first place, because Rudy Gobert was having one of those active games where his presence in the lane was really felt. But it seemed like really got a rhythm back on Wednesday in that win against New Orleans, because the previous game, that was Houston, he didn't, and he had missed the, 3 or 4 games with that sore groin. So I feel like it took a minute for Rudy to kind of get back at the pace of what the Wolves were doing and what they wanted from him. And that might have showed a little bit at times. But yeah, I agree. This was a good Rudy game. It was a good defensive game. And specifically against Ja Morant, whether it was Rudy in the paint where Ja likes to get, or whether it was his primary defender, whatever, Ja Morant has the ability to take over games and just be so dominant where you're like, that was a Ja stretch. He just scored 10 of his team's 12 points or something. And he never did that tonight. You mentioned the free throws, and he was trying to get into the paint, but nothing was easy. There was a lot of flailing and falling down and just kind of wild shots that we've seen him make before, but a lot of these were not those types of Ja shots. I feel like he looked a little bit frustrated. The Wolves really played a good defensive game against him, and at no point did he take over, even if it was just for a few minutes, a little stretch. Ja didn't have, I mean, he had a triple-double. He was great. He was his typical self, but he never took this game over and really threatened the lead against Minnesota.
Yeah, and we talked about Desmond Bane not playing, and obviously that's huge. That takes away the Grizzlies' biggest three-point shooting threat, but outside of Ja Morant, they didn't really get anything consistently offensively. Dillon Brooks started out decently from the field, but then other than that, it was kind of like Brandon Clark, on the offensive glass, and that was pretty much it. There wasn't much efficient offense for Memphis, and like Ja can get his triple-double and he can shoot almost 50% from the field, but if you force him to commit 6 turnovers and nobody else really hurts you, nobody else comes to the party for Memphis, then you can live with that. And obviously the Grizzlies are arguably the best defensive team in the league. I think a lot of the metrics say they are. And the Wolves still managed to drop 111 and shoot over 51% from the field. And when you play that well defensively against generally a good offensive team, you're going to give yourself a chance to win, especially at home. And when Ja turns it over 6 times, and just making him work for everything is so huge. Another area I was really worried about for the Wolves in this game, offensive rebounding for the Grizzlies. Memphis is the best offensive rebounding team in the league by percentage, and they did grab 15 offensive boards. However, they only out-rebounded the Wolves by 2 overall for the game. I thought the Wolves, there were a lot of offensive rebounds out there because Memphis shot the ball so poorly from the perimeter, or potential offensive rebounds, I should say. But the Wolves, I thought, held their own on the glass, and a big part of that was Rudy Gobert. D'Angelo Russell had 8 rebounds in this game, and there were a couple contested ones where he was, rebounding down and kind of doubling back to get a board, and those are things we haven't seen him do consistently this year, and that was huge. So I thought, holding their own on the glass was a really, really big part of this game. Memphis out-rebounded the Wolves by 30, I think, the last time in the game that Memphis won, I believe it was, earlier this year against Minnesota. So this was much needed for them to battle on the glass like they did.
Yeah, the rebounding advantage or disadvantage, it was major the last time these teams met. And Steven Adams will make those numbers go down for Memphis as an offensive rebounding team because he's among the top in the league. But even Jaren Jackson Jr., he played fine, but again, he didn't dominate for stretches on the glass, just like Ja didn't dominate anywhere in this game for prolonged stretches. So I wonder if Memphis is going to have to figure out how to adjust. Tonight they had to without Desmond Bane, but Steven Adams is going to miss a good month. Yeah. And he just so much of what they do on the glass and just that bully stuff in the paint that he's so good at and so strong that maybe they will miss him more than just his basic stats would indicate. This is 5 losses in a row for Memphis. That's kind of shocking. I know they had just won 11 straight, but to go 0-for on this road trip is shocking. And I feel like you can tell by the minutes Ja Morant played in the second half that they were in desperate mode to get this win. So, I don't know how far that carries the Wolves or what it does, but the Wolves just beat the Pelicans, who are ahead of them in the West, and they just beat Memphis, who is ahead of them in the West, and their next 2 games are against Sacramento, who is also ahead of them in the West. Maybe this is where the Wolves finally start climbing.
Yeah. And last point, it related to that because they are back-to-back Saturday night. I thought the Timberwolves bench played really well in this game, pretty much across the board, especially in the first half. Nate Knight and Naz Reid were both fantastic. They combined to score 19 points on 12 shots, and with 5 rebounds, only 1 turnover combined between Nate Knight and Naz Reid. Really solid minutes. And Jalen Noel, who's been really up and down, mostly down lately, had a nice little stretch there as well. I think it was first half. He turned the ball over a bunch, mostly second half. But for the most part, I thought the bench minutes were really good, and that's important. Now, I mean, they still had, 4 starters play over 30 minutes, but hopefully, the bench can come to play as well Saturday night. You mentioned Sacramento. They've got the next 2 against the Kings. And we talked about this before, but playing to the level of their competition. And we've seen that here these last 3 games, the loss to Houston, the win over the Pelicans, and the win over the Grizzlies. Hopefully that continues at least for the next couple.
Yeah, that would be nice to see if the Wolves can just gain some ground and just get out of that 500. They're a game above and 2 games below, and a game above and 2 games below, and we just kind of yin and yang back and forth there. And what they've been missing is like this really good traction against these really good teams. The 5-game winning streak that they had this season started in Cleveland, and then it was kind of just random teams. And this one, if they could pile up a few wins against the teams that are directly above them, I feel like it just they carry more weight because you can see the movement. You can see when you're beating the teams ahead of you what it does for the confidence, what it does for standings. But they've changed so drastically in the West too on a nightly basis.
Yeah. So
Sacramento's a good team though. We haven't seen them up close yet this season, but just looking at the numbers and what De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis have done and that team, and they're rallying around the beam. I mean, I think it's a completely different Sacramento Kings team than we've seen in years past. So buckle up for these next 2.
Yeah, Sacramento just beat these Grizzlies by 33 a couple games ago, and then the Kings lost to the Raptors on Wednesday and have had the last couple nights off. So they're undoubtedly waiting in Minneapolis for the Wolves. But yeah, these 2 against the Kings, and then you get Golden State, who's been alternating wins and losses of late, and 500 team, but we all know what Golden State is. So yeah, these next 3, if they could manage to win 2 out of 3 or even all 3, then you get Orlando and then a couple more against Denver. But not to look too far ahead, there's to get these tiebreakers, they are now a game up on Memphis in the head-to-head this season. If they're able to sweep both these games at home against Sacramento and get that 2-game advantage against the Kings, those things could matter when we get down to the end of the season, and we're talking about playoff positioning. Of course, we'll go live following the game Saturday night as well against the Kings, about 45 minutes or so after the final horn. So be sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube to be notified when we go live. You can also listen to the audio after the fact if you can't watch live on all the Locked On Wolves audio channels, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find this show. A big thank you for listening. A big thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.